With so much at stake, how do NFL players continue to literally drop the ball before crossing the goal line? What's it going to take to stop this? Do they need to get cut? Plus, is it time for Penn State to move on from James Franklin? All that and much more straight ahead. I'm Doug Kezirian, and this is Hard Pass, also available in podcast. Oh my gosh, it happened again. And this time, it literally cost the Arizona Cardinals the game. The reaction by all of us non-football players is, why does this keep happening? Sadly, I'm obviously talking about the epidemic that just won't stop. Players beginning a touchdown celebration before crossing the goal line. The issue is usually a player just dropping the ball too early, like casual, too cool for school. Other times, they start to switch hands and maybe raise the ball, but they start to bobble it, and again, all before crossing the goal line. The consequences have already been drastic this season. 2 teams have lost games because of it. Arizona's Emari DeMercado would have put Arizona up 28-6 in the fourth quarter. Instead, this nonsensical play kept the door slightly open for the Titans, who somehow came all the way back and won. Other crazy plays also contributed. To me, worse than DeMercado's dumb play in the moment, there seemed to be very little remorse once he knew the ramifications of the loss and had some time to reflect.
I mean, I just made a mistake. It's not really no excuse. Just let the ball go too early.
What was going through your mind as you were crossing the goal line?
I mean, obviously emotional, big play, but I just got to be smarter.
I saw an interaction with you and JG on the sideline. Looks like he came over. It looked like he was pretty heated when you said in that moment.
Just got to be smarter. It's as simple as that.
You ever made a mistake like that?
I haven't, but I guess it happens to the best of us, right?
Are you kidding? It happens to the best of us? That's something you say with a dropped catch or something like that, not something this indefensible and stupid. A couple weeks earlier, Indy's Adonai made a great catch and run and then started to celebrate too early. Sure enough, ball goes out of the end zone. Touchback, Rams get possession. This and an offensive holding by Mitchell in the final few minutes literally cost Indy the game. Inexcusable. So what should coaches and franchises do to prevent this from happening again? It's costing teams a win. Therefore, it's going to cost a coach that's hanging on by a thread his job, i.e. Arizona, right? At some point, the coach needs to take action and get results. Now, back in high school, if I were late to basketball practice, a coach would make the guy who was late, sit in a chair in the middle of the court and have him watch his teammates run suicides and laps. Other sports, they'd make the guy who was late to run the laps and things like that. But the guilty conscience, I don't know if any of that works, because in my eyes, the real issue is the players who haven't committed this. Now, I think someone who's done this, like the guys we just touched on, they're never going to make that mistake again. But young up-and-comers, because with young people, they don't think it can happen to them. All this stuff, right? I just don't think the guilty conscience of laps and stuff like that, because you're trying to get ahead of it. That's the key. I don't think Mitchell's going to do this again. I don't think DeMercado's going to do it again. But it's the ones coming up that you have to worry about. Now, one NFL analyst had a very simple yet effective concept in my eyes. So let's time now for our first heat check. Talking about Louis Riddick of ESPN, does a wonderful job, former player as well. At this point, if you purposely drop the ball before going uncontested across the goal line, you deserve to be fined or cut or something. It's beyond stupid. Starblazer said, if I were the Cardinals coach, I'd be chewing them out in the locker room. Then I'd text every one of them that they have a mandatory practice tomorrow with pads. I'd fine DeMercado so much, he'd never think of doing that again. And I'd bench him even though they're short of backs. And then an image that just says, the Cardinals lost this game. Yeah, crazy when you think about the score and where they are. And then I like this from Scott Howard. Criticize Emari DeMercado all you want, but it looked cool how he slowed down right before the goal line and decided not to hold on to the ball. You cannot put a price on cool like that. And he retweeted something similar when Mitchell did it. That's when you see it said like that. I mean, that's what's going through these guys' heads. So it just shows you how stupid it is. And that's why I really appreciated that tweet. I think you absolutely have to cut the player, because you have to send the message to all the young players who haven't committed this violation yet, because you need to nip it in the bud and get ahead of it. Other players losing their jobs, sadly, is the only thing that's going to resonate with guys who have yet to do it, because the punishment ultimately hurts their wallet, and that is number one priority. So if this started happening and guys started getting cut, then others would start thinking about not doing it. After all, this first happened in 2008 with the Eagles' Deshaun Jackson against the Cowboys. And it was crazy at the time, and every time I see it, it looks dumber and dumber. So how are we still discussing this 17 years later? It's insane. And it's often role players who are just on the cusp but keep staying in the NFL. I just don't know why it keeps happening. Let me know your thoughts. Am I being too critical? Comes with the territory? Or do you have an idea on how a team or a coach or a franchise should punish a player? Please join the conversation. Or is it a classic case of what Albert Einstein once said? Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. Well played, Mr. Einstein. Another big football story can also be attributed to a similar concept. Not stupidity, but rather, you just are what you are. James Franklin just is not Big Game James, which has been proven over the years, time and time again, but at least he typically handles his business against inferior competition. However, that did not happen against winless UCLA, losing as about a 25-point favorite. It's the first time in 40 years that a top 10 team lost to a school with a record of 0-4 or worse. Penn State has a decision to make. Continue to churn out solid season by Franklin, although they're unranked right now, and accept there's a ceiling to the program, as in not a championship program. Franklin is now 4-21 against top 10 opponents since coming to State College, and that includes 1-18 mark in the Big Ten. Meanwhile, other conference programs, their rivals, are progressing, but the Nittany Lions are not. Keep in mind, Michigan and Ohio State have won the last two national titles. Now, Franklin has obviously accomplished a lot in his decade plus with the Nittany Lions, including last year's run to the national semifinals. But again, against an elite program, they choked down the stretch and lost by 3 to Notre Dame. Usually, these decisions come down to money. Franklin's buyout is reportedly $56 million. That number does drop slightly to $48 million January 1st, but still, that's a huge chunk of dough, but it's not inconceivable. Texas A&M paid Jimbo Fisher $76 million to go away with his buyout. With all these types of situations and someone who's accomplished a lot like Franklin, you probably should be 100% sure the move would improve the program, i.e. have the replacement lined up. Who would it be? John Gruden's name has been tossed around, which would certainly be compelling. One thing to note, that although he's established in NFL circles, he does connect with a younger audience given his Barstool involvement. Nebraska's Matt Rule has been mentioned a bunch, given he played linebacker for Penn State under Joe Paterno. I just don't think you can make that move. It needs to be a big and more justifiable splash. Rule's a big name and all that, but it's a lateral move in my eyes. I just don't think Rule has accomplished enough for you to justify, given what Franklin has accomplished. Now, Indiana's Kurt Cignetti, certainly justifiable, would be interesting. Who knows? Nick Saban. Remember, he's originally from nearby West Virginia. It's far-fetched, obviously, but you have to make the call. In my eyes, that's the type of guy that you would justify making the move. But if you don't, and that's fine because he's earned that equity, you do have to ask yourself, if this record's not enough, then what is? 4-40 against top 10 opponents? 4-100? You have to at least recognize where you are, and that helps. Ask yourself those questions, and let me know if you think Penn State should make a change, or is this crazy talk? It's one game. Franklin has earned the right and the latitude, given he's been there over a decade. Certainly, we've seen other programs fire their coach and get worse. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you do think he should be let go, then who do you think should be the replacement? Let me know your thoughts. Join the conversation. Time now for Fans in the Stands, and this is when we get to respond to comments from our audience or fans in the stands. And usually the most recent episode. And I want to go back to 2 episodes because we talked about the ties. Remember the big tie between the Packers and the Cowboys, 40-40. And I just don't think we should have them in the NFL. You got to have a solution to all this. I came up with one incorporating how college resolves extra overtimes. And Sean Scott says, come on, Doug, you can't compare the savagery of the NFL with any other sport. You can't expect these guys to just keep playing. Other sports do, in fact, have ties. The NHL has ties. We have the shootouts to decide who gets the extra points. The winner of the shootout doesn't get the 2 points. The most popular sport in the world has ties all the time. Of course, he's referencing soccer. Most importantly to me, and I believe you, what will the books, as in sports books, do with all the extra stats created by the college rules? It's a great question, but let's start. I'm okay with the current format if you want to do 10 minutes. But if it's tied after that, then you can go to what the college football has in the extra overtime, just 2-point conversions, right? An extra play or two. I understand the savagery. That's why I brought it up, because it's just a play or two or something like that. You can't just keep playing. Hockey has intermissions between playoff overtimes. I get it, but you got to resolve this. And if teams hate it, then go for 2 during regulation and stop letting things go to overtime. But in terms of sports books, it's a great question. I don't know. I think you have to allow stats from overtime, even the extra sort of shootout, if you will. But it's 2-point. Georgia Tech last year was a thriller. I think it's okay to have some stats from that. Again, just 2-point conversions. Obviously, it would have a big impact in fantasy too. Ryan Huffman says, and this was in relation to Nafisa Colliers in the WNBA, calling out Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and quoting me from my episode, "You always got to play nice until you're at the negotiating table. As late as possible in the process, when the players need their salaries, that's when they're most likely to cave." And then he says, "I know that's just the cold truth, but it's a perfect example as to why unions and lawyers are so important across all sports and industries." I get it, but you're also showing your hand, and that's why you want to play nice. When you're out in public, sure, you're trying to win them over as humans, things like that, or at least you should, but you can't show your hand until the very end, because it gives them time to formulate a response and another approach, things along those lines. So that's more what I was saying, but it's a great point. Like, the fact that the players have this union is really important in the negotiations, especially the fact that they have the big names, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and whatnot, Asia Wilson. And that's going to be huge when they do, in fact, approach this deadline of Halloween. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Art Bass. Always appreciate the input. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. And always let us know what you are thinking and join the conversation, particularly whether it's James Franklin or how to punish or get these guys to stop dropping the ball before the goal line.